On Water Street, near the sea, there stood a very ancient house. In that house lived the man whom Kingsport called the terrible old man. He lived alone. He was believed to be rich, and he was believed to be exceedingly feeble. The people of Kingsport said many things about him. They thought he hid a fortune somewhere inside his musty, venerable rooms. Yet those same stories usually kept him safe from men who might otherwise have found such a fortune attractive. He was said to have been captain of East India clipper ships in his day. He was so old that no one remembered him young, and so silent that few people knew his real name. In the gnarled front yard he kept large painted stones grouped like idols from some obscure Eastern temple. But the stones were not the only things that frightened people away. Those who peered through the dusty panes spoke of a bare room and a table and many peculiar bottles. In each bottle hung a small piece of lead, suspended like a pendulum from a string. They said he spoke to those bottles. He called them Jack, Scarface, Long Tom, Spanish Joe, Peters, and Mate Ellis. And when he spoke, the little lead pendulum inside the bottle would vibrate as if it answered. Those who watched him do this did not watch him again. Angelo Ricci, Joe Sanek, and Manuel Silva were not men of old Kingsport. They stood outside its circle of warnings and inherited fears. To them, the terrible old man was only a tottering graybeard, so weak that he walked with a knotted cane, and so rich that weakness seemed almost an invitation. Everyone shunned the old man. Even the dogs barked at him strangely, but business was business, and to men of their profession, there was a lure in a feeble old recluse who had no bank account and who paid for small necessities with Spanish gold and silver minted 2 centuries before. They chose the night of April 11th. Ricci and Silva would call upon the old gentleman at the front of the house. Sanek would wait with a covered motor car in Ship Street by the gate in the tall rear wall. If all went quietly, they would leave quietly. They started separately, as arranged. Ricci and Silva met by the old man's front gate on Water Street. They did not like the way the moon shone down through budding branches onto the painted stones, but they had more important things to consider than idle superstition. They expected that making the old man speak might be unpleasant work. Aged sea captains, they thought, were stubborn. Still, he was very old, he was very weak, and there were 2 visitors. They knew how to make unwilling men speak, and the screams of a weak old man, they thought, could easily be muffled. So they moved toward the one lighted window and heard him talking childishly to his bottles. Then Ricci and Silva put on their masks. They stood before the weather-stained oaken door, and politely, very politely, they knocked. Waiting seemed very long to Mr. Sanek. He sat restlessly in the covered motor car by the old man's back gate in Ship Street. He had heard hideous screams from the ancient house just after the appointed hour. He had told them, after all, to be as gentle as possible. He watched the narrow oaken gate in the high-ivied wall. Again and again he looked at his watch. Had the old man died too soon? Had a search of the house become necessary? Then he heard a soft tread or a tapping on the walk inside the gate. The rusty latch was gently tried. The narrow, heavy door swung inward. In the pallid glow of the single street lamp, Sanek strained his eyes to see what his colleagues had brought out, but his colleagues were not there. Only the terrible old man stood in the gateway, leaning quietly on his knotted cane and smiling hideously. Sanek had never before noticed the color of the old man's eyes. Now he saw that they were yellow. Small things, make great excitement in small towns. So Kingsport talked all that spring and summer about the three bodies the tide washed in. They were unidentifiable, horribly slashed, as if by many cutlasses, and horribly mangled, as if under the tread of many cruel boot heels. Some people spoke also of the deserted motor car in Ship Street, and of certain inhuman cries heard in the night. But the terrible old man took no interest in idle village gossip. He was reserved by nature, and when one is aged and feeble, reserve is doubly strong. Besides, so ancient a sea captain must have witnessed many things more stirring in the far-off days of his unremembered youth.